Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Avorion episode 19. I'm Enigmius and today we're building a new ship. We're starting a new ship. This is the Samson, named after the legendary figure who made luggage, apparently. This is the follow-up to the Malapis build. The blueprint for the Malapis went out in the last episode. And now we're kind of looking at what ship we would build if we had spent a little bit of time in the Malapis running around doing different things and gathering resources, etc., etc. So this ship is going to be made out of titanium for the hull instead of iron. I've decided this time around to build the hull mostly out of armor blocks. There are obviously going to be some consequences for that in terms of the overall mass of the ship and its handling characteristics, but I've kind of decided that there's some things that I can really only learn by doing. If I make it out of armor and it turns out that it's not as robust as I think it is, and you know, the handling doesn't justify the benefit to its survivability, etc., etc., then now I know, and we can mix things up a little bit in future builds and try and find a balance that I'm happy with. But as it stands, the whole idea of building ships is a little bit tricky these days on account of the fact that creative mode, without the use of console commands, basically only allows you unlimited access to materials with which to build your ship. It doesn't provide you with any protection from bad guys. It doesn't, you know, if your ship needs something in order to function outside of simply materials, you still have to go get it the normal way. For example, crew, weapons, systems, whatever you might need above and beyond the basic ore to build the ship, you might as well be in survival for all practical intents and purposes. A viewer was kind enough to provide me with the console command that enables the developer console so that you can get systems and turrets and add crew without having to be at a station and buy them, and do all of these things that a person might expect that you would be able to do in creative mode, which to me is very helpful. You know, one of the things that I've kind of put in the back of my mind for this particular series in this game is that I don't want to do 100% creative mode builds and then put them out as blueprints without being able to speak to what it's going to take in a survival kind of setting to be able to get the materials and make it a worthwhile sort of project to take on. So that's, you know, one of the things that I'm keeping in mind. But when it comes to, you know, trying to build the ship and being constantly disrupted by all of these enemy ships jumping in and making pests of themselves, having to build next to a station if you want to be able to hire crew in a hurry to get your ship out of harm's way, just makes it so that the ships that you're trying to get away from are more likely to come see you anyways, because they tend to gravitate towards the stations if they don't have anyone else nearby to go and attack. So it's this weird sort of balancing act and trying to find our place in it that's not bypassing the actual game mechanics, so that we can build viable ships for the survival game, but at the same time not driving ourselves insane in the process. So the whole purpose of this ship, the Samson, is to have everything that you need to do a little bit of everything, kind of like what I had in mind with the Malapis, but a couple of significant additions. One, I want considerably increased cargo space. That was one of the things that I encountered with the Malapis, is I would kind of be building somewhere or you know, doing whatever somewhere in a sector. The bad guys would come in and there would happen to be a group of them that was far away, and they would fight and they would destroy you know, freighters and cargo ships and just basically making a mess all over the sector. And I would go after the fact, of course, like the good scavenger I am, into these debris fields where they're filled with cargo containers that I couldn't pick up because we didn't have enough cargo space in the Malapis to do that. And I always felt like I was missing out on a potential income source from being able to salvage some of these cargo containers floating in space. So I decided with the Malapis that the next ship would have more room for this kind of thing, and hopefully that would help us, you know, accumulate credits so that we can buy some of the things that you can't as easily gather. So that was sort of a key sort of thing that I wanted to have in mind. Also, I would like to be able to take advantage of more mining turrets or salvage turrets and switch them back and forth, sort of depending on what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. I was thinking about it, and in a perfect world we would have lots of mining turrets, and then we would also have lots of salvage turrets, and then we wouldn't have to switch the turrets around. We would just go do whatever we wanted to do, and we would have the turrets there. We just have to switch to that bank. Not a problem. Doesn't really work out that way, I found. Primarily because, first of all, you have to have the systems in order to expand the number of unarmed turrets, of course, that you can use simultaneously. Then you have to have the important detail. You have to have the crew on board to be able to man these turrets. And if you've got all of these different turrets, and you say, okay, well, I've got 4 salvage turrets and 4 mining turrets, and all you're doing is mining for a really long time, you're kind of losing out on the benefit of having all 8 of your unarmed turrets set to mining and being able to just scoot around and mine asteroids really, really quickly, etc., etc. So there's going to be a certain amount of thought put into making it easy to swap back and forth between these larger assortments of turrets, unarmed turrets specifically, so that we can gather the goodies faster and put ourselves on track to being able to upgrade our ships, build new ships, etc., etc. So trying to get things a little bit more efficient as we move from one iteration, one design to the next. And of course, there's also the aesthetic that I'm going for. And this one is kind of heading in the direction of a squat, sort of bulky looking ship that's ultimately, I think, going to be a little bit smaller than the Malapis overall. But you may have noticed that I've actually been putting the equipment on the inside of the ship as we've been building it out this time, instead of building the hull and then sticking the equipment inside afterwards. Part of that is to put them in a position, put all of these key components in place when we can see how much armor they're going to have around them as we build it. And also making better use of the interior of the ship. You can see there's actually no dead space inside the ship so far, and I want to keep it that way for the remainder of the build. I don't mind if there's a little pocket here or there that we just couldn't fill in because the shape of the outer hull didn't come together just right. But I would rather have a really beefy, robust, well-protected outer hull with all of the goodies tucked inside, nice and compact. And then if we do find ourselves in sort of a combat scenario, we aren't necessarily as concerned about what happens when the bad guys are spraying their chain guns all over us and punching little holes here and there and wondering what's going to get destroyed on the inside. That's sort of one of the key things. So I expect this one to be not as long as the Malapis, probably a little bit wider and a little bit thicker. It's going to have more mass, obviously, because it's built out of titanium instead of iron, but it's not going to be a huge amount of extra mass. And if everything sort of comes together the way I have in mind, it'll be a good solid upgrade, a nice progression from the Malapis to the next iteration, and then we can scoot around and do what we need to do. One of the things that I learned from the Malapis is that we first built it, we had engines and thrusters and a certain amount of power output, and we sort of brought everything up to the point where we were consuming all of the power that we were outputting, so that when we wanted to, for example, boost to get our speed up as quickly as possible, running away from bad guys that spawned in on top of us, for example, we could do that and we could get up to a certain speed. And then as part of the upgrading process, before we released the blueprint, is I added a bunch of extra power generation. I added more generators because we suddenly had more power output than we were using, because I didn't have the materials at the time to also upgrade all of the components inside. When we boosted, we could boost for much longer and we could reach a much higher top speed. I was commenting it was something in the neighborhood of 1300 to 1400 meters per second. And then once we installed all the extra components, the directional thrusters and the gyros and the inertial dampeners, to consume most of that power generation, that extra power again, we weren't able to boost for as long, so the top speed while boosting came way down. So that was something that I sort of had in the back of my mind as well, as I really liked that idea of the longer boost resulting in the higher top speed, because there are just so many times when I find myself in a situation where the best thing that I can do is just get the hell out of the way for a little while, reassess the situation, then come up with a plan. And then if I want to go back into a bad situation, at least I'm doing so with an idea in my head of what I would like to do, instead of responding to bad guys who are doing bad things to my bad ship. If you catch my meaning. So there's all kinds of different things coming together in this. There are a lot of things that I haven't completely decided on this time around just yet, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You can see we've got quite a beefy section already. And this is actually going to be probably the top 2/3 that we're looking at. There's going to be a bunch of stuff that we're going to be putting on the underside and then closing that in with a fairly robust bit of armor as well. In this case, the things that I'm specifically looking at adding are more engines, again for that top speed and the basic acceleration even without the boost. But all of the cargo containers are going to be sort of on the underside and then surrounded with armor. Once we get all of those things in place, all the things that we have in place now, the cargo containers, then we'll have the opportunity to kind of leave a little bit of room for upgrades as we progress. Once we put the ship into service and we scoot around in it for a little while, we get an idea of how it's going to perform, decide what we want to upgrade, if anything. We'll have a little bit of space to do that, probably in some sort of outrigger, a little bit beefier than the Malapis in terms of its appearance. Like I say, we want something kind of stocky and beefy looking. So we'll do something like that. I haven't completely decided on what I'm going to do with the front end of the ship, because I'd actually started building a ship, the beginnings of what this would be, and it just looked very phallic, which is, I mean, there's only so many things that you can do before they eventually start looking a little bit phallic, whether you intend to or not, because these days, if it's a cylinder or a rectangle, someone's going to point out that it looks like a penis. And I just felt that the design that I had come up with was too much like that, and I didn't necessarily want that to be the case. So it'll probably end up looking a little bit off when we finally come up with an idea for the front of the ship. But sometimes it can't be avoided. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, why am I changing this design because someone else is going to say it looks like a pee-pee? Because sometimes you don't want to deal with it, but at the same time, if I come up with a design that I like, I'm not going to abandon it because of what someone else might say about it. That's sort of, I guess, the fair way of putting it. So the next episode, we're going to pick up where we left off. We're going to get the cargo stuff on the underside. We're going to close in the underside. Maybe work a little bit on the front, maybe work a little bit on the outriggers. One way or another, we're going to make some progress, and then we'll eventually have a blueprint for this guy as well. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes in this and other series, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.